Sammy Davis Jr. drew his gun in a blinding flash that left the Warner Brothers backlot buzzing with amazement. Set workers applauded the virtuoso performance they'd just witnessed from one of Hollywood's most talented entertainers. Then, Steve McQueen stepped into the light, adjusted his Persol sunglasses, and demonstrated something that made Sammy's incredible speed look like slow motion. Real speed, it turned out, wasn't about the hand. It was about the decision. The summer heat suddenly felt colder than the morning shadows. If you respect the real Steve McQueen, subscribe to Steve McQueen Untold Legacy. June 1965. Warner Brothers Studios. Backlot Training Range. Hollywood, California. A specialized facility where movie stars transformed themselves into convincing gunfighters under the unforgiving Southern California sun. Dust kicked up by desert winds settled on everything: wooden targets, hay bales, ammunition boxes, and the dreams of actors who understood that authenticity separated great performances from adequate ones. Temperature climbing toward 95 degrees, with heat that made metal too hot to touch, and turned leather holsters into furnaces that tested dedication against comfort. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air like incense in a church dedicated to the mythology of the American West. Wooden targets bearing the scars of thousands of practice rounds stood at regulation distances, each one representing another step towards screen credibility that audiences could sense, but not always articulate. This was sacred ground where legends proved they deserved their reputations through skill rather than publicity. Sammy Davis Jr., 39 years old, had arrived an hour earlier for what was supposed to be a brief promotional appearance related to his television variety show. But the sight of the practice range had awakened something in him that went beyond professional obligation into personal passion. Wearing a silver-studded holster that looked more like jewelry than equipment, he moved with the fluid grace of someone who treated every physical action like choreography. His energy filled the space around him like electricity, making even mundane activities look like entertainment. Steve McQueen, 35 years old, had been training on the range for 3 hours, preparing for Nevada Smith with the methodical intensity that characterized his approach to every professional challenge. Seated in the shade with a glass of ice water, wearing his signature Persol sunglasses and a simple white cotton shirt that showed sweat stains despite the early hour. Watching Sammy's performance with the quiet attention of someone who appreciated skill while maintaining his own competitive confidence. Two different approaches to the same deadly art meeting in neutral territory that would reveal which philosophy served authenticity better. For 30 minutes, Sammy had been entertaining the small crowd of set workers and technical advisors with demonstrations of quick-draw technique that bordered on the supernatural. Each draw executed with balletic precision that made mechanical movement look like performance art. His gun appeared in his hand like magic, fired with perfect accuracy, and returned to leather in movements so fluid they seemed choreographed by forces beyond human capability. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sammy announced in his distinctive voice, "you are witnessing the fastest hands in Hollywood. Watch closely because blink and you'll miss the whole show." He positioned himself 25 feet from a regulation target, feet set in a stance that somehow managed to look both professional and theatrical. The silver-studded holster caught sunlight and threw it back in brilliant flashes that made him look like a figure from American mythology rather than a television entertainer. "Ready?" he called out to his impromptu audience. Set workers gathered closer, understanding that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't just a singer, dancer, and comedian. He was a virtuoso of human capability who could master any skill that required coordination, timing, and showmanship. The draw was instantaneous and perfect. One moment his hand hung relaxed beside the holster. The next moment, a Colt .45 had materialized in his grip, fired 3 shots that punched through the target's center mass, and disappeared back into leather before human eyes could track the complete sequence. The crowd erupted in applause. Set workers whistled and cheered. Technical advisors nodded with professional appreciation for technique that exceeded anything they usually saw from actors learning gunfighting for roles. "Now that," Sammy announced with justified pride, "is how it's done in the major leagues." He turned toward McQueen with the confident smile of someone who'd just proven a point that had never been in serious dispute. "Steve, you know anyone in this town who can match that kind of speed?" McQueen set down his water glass and stood up slowly, movements that carried no urgency but somehow suggested complete readiness for whatever was about to happen. "That was impressive, Sammy. Really impressive." "Thank you, baby. Hours of practice, natural talent, and a little bit of that old show business magic. Mind if I give it a try? Be my guest. But don't feel bad if you can't quite keep up. This is what happens when you combine natural ability with years of professional entertainment experience." McQueen walked from the shade into the full glare of the summer sun, each step measured and purposeful. The contrast with Sammy's dynamic energy was stark. Where Sammy filled space with movement and personality, McQueen created space through stillness and focus. Where Sammy entertained, McQueen intimidated without trying. "Sammy," McQueen said as he positioned himself at the firing line, "can I ask you something about technique?" "Sure, always happy to share knowledge with fellow professionals." "When you draw, what are you thinking about?" Sammy considered the question with the seriousness he applied to all aspects of performance. "I'm thinking about timing, coordination, muscle memory, and making sure the whole sequence looks as smooth and impressive as possible." "That's interesting. What are you thinking about when you draw?" McQueen adjusted his own holster, making small modifications that prioritized function over appearance. "I'm thinking about ending the fight before it starts. Different approaches to the same goal, different goals entirely." The crowd sensed something shifting in the dynamic between the two performers. What had started as friendly competition was developing into something that resembled a philosophical examination of fundamental differences in approach and purpose. "Steve, you want to explain what you mean by that?" Sammy asked, his tone carrying genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness. "Your technique is beautiful, Sammy. Artistic. Perfect for entertaining audiences who want to see impressive skill demonstrated with style and flair. Thank you. But it's performance. All acting is performance. Some performance looks like performance. Other performance looks like survival." McQueen removed his Persol sunglasses. Those pale blue eyes that had already made him famous now focused on Sammy with complete attention. "Can I show you something?" "Absolutely. I'm always interested in learning new approaches to technique." "This isn't really a technique. It's more like a decision." McQueen positioned himself at the firing line, but his stance looked nothing like Sammy's theatrical setup. No dramatic positioning or optimal camera angles. Just natural readiness that somehow suggested more danger than all of Sammy's showmanship combined. "Watch this," McQueen said quietly. What happened next challenged every assumption about speed, technique, and the relationship between entertainment and lethality. McQueen drew his weapon, but Drew suggested visible movement from one position to another. What actually occurred was instantaneous materialization. His hand appeared around the Colt's grip as if it had teleported there. No balletic grace or theatrical flourish. No visible transition from stillness to action. Just sudden, absolute efficiency. 3 shots cracked across the range so quickly they sounded like one extended explosion. 3 holes appeared in the target's center mass, grouped so tightly they could be covered with a silver dollar. The gun disappeared back into leather before the sound of the shots finished echoing across the backlot. The crowd went completely silent. Not the appreciative silence that followed impressive performances, but the stunned silence that followed encounters with something beyond normal human capability. Sammy stood frozen, his entertainer's smile replaced by the expression of someone trying to process what his eyes had just witnessed. Professional recognition mixed with genuine astonishment in a way that transcended competitive dynamics to reach something like awe. "Jesus Christ," one of the set workers whispered. McQueen put his sunglasses back on with casual movements that somehow made what had just happened look routine rather than extraordinary. "Different approach to the same tools," Sammy found his voice, though it carried none of its usual theatrical projection. "Steve, that wasn't faster. That was something else entirely." "How do you mean?" "My draw's fast. What you just did doesn't even qualify as speed. It's more like decision made manifest." "That's an interesting way to put it." "I'm serious." My technique is about executing movement as quickly and smoothly as possible. Your technique is about eliminating the gap between decision and result." McQueen nodded with approval for Sammy's analysis. "You understand the difference. I understand that we're not really doing the same thing, even though we're both drawing guns." "Right. You're demonstrating capability. I'm implementing necessity." The crowd began to disperse, understanding that they'd witnessed something that transcended entertainment to reach territory they couldn't quite categorize. Not a contest, because contests implied comparable approaches to similar challenges. This had been revelation of fundamental differences in purpose and philosophy. "Sammy," McQueen said as they prepared to leave the practice area, "your speed is incredible. Really, you've mastered technique that most people couldn't achieve with years of dedicated practice. Thank you. But I feel like I just discovered that I've been playing a completely different game than I thought I was." "How so?" "I've been perfecting the art of looking fast. You've been perfecting the reality of being lethal. Both valuable for different purposes. Maybe. But only one of them would keep you alive in an actual gunfight." McQueen smiled without condescension. "Sammy, you're an entertainer. The most important thing for you is giving audiences experiences they can't get anywhere else, making them feel amazed, inspired, transported. And for you, for me, the most important thing is making characters believable when they're in situations where survival depends on capability rather than charisma. Different kinds of authenticity, different definitions of what authentic means." As they walked away from the practice targets, Sammy looked back at the holes McQueen had punched through steel with mechanical precision. "Steve, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you think entertainment and lethality are mutually exclusive?" McQueen considered the question with the thoughtfulness that characterized his approach to all serious topics. "I think they serve different purposes. Entertainment inspires people. Lethality protects them." "And both necessary?" "Both necessary for different situations. Your approach gives people hope and joy and the belief that human capability can transcend normal limitations. My approach gives people confidence that heroes can handle situations where hope and joy aren't enough." The afternoon sun was climbing toward dangerous levels, making extended outdoor work inadvisable for anyone who valued consciousness and comfort. Both men understanding that the conversation they'd been having had revealed more about their respective crafts than hours of technical instruction could accomplish. "Sammy," McQueen said as they reached the edge of the practice area, "thank you for the demonstration. What you showed me today was genuinely impressive." "Thank you, but I think what you showed me was more important." "How's that?" "You showed me the difference between mastering a skill and embodying a capability. Between learning to do something well and becoming someone who simply is something." "And which do you think serves audiences better?" "Both, probably. But in different ways and for different reasons." As McQueen prepared to leave the backlot, he turned back one final time. "Sammy, your speed is a gift, really. Use it to give people joy and amazement and the belief that human potential exceeds what they think possible." "And your speed?" "My speed is a tool. I use it to make characters believable when they're fighting for things that matter more than entertainment. Both authentic in their own ways, both necessary for different kinds of truth." The summer heat shimmered off concrete and steel, creating optical illusions that made distant objects look unstable and dreamlike. But the lesson both men had learned was solid, permanent, carved into understanding that would influence every future performance. Sammy Davis Jr. drew his gun in a blinding flash, until Steve McQueen stepped into the light and showed him what real speed means. Subscribe to Steve McQueen Untold Legacy for stories they never told you.